Hello, welcome to the pre-lab talk for laboratory measurements and techniques. In this lab, you're going to go to course content, and you'll notice that the most recent course content is laboratory measurements. The lab quiz is at the top. If you can't see the lab quiz, it's because you haven't clicked through everything below it. So you don't get to see the lab quiz until you've clicked everything else. Make sure before you get into any of it, you read through the pre-lab. Now, these are designed to be questions to help you do well on a lab quiz. Make sure you are very familiar with and especially understand this section. You will be reading graduated cylinders in the lab. And this shows you exactly how to read it right down here where it says maybe you'd say 21.6 or 21.7. And that's because in this measurement, we have a 20 milliliter marking. And then the first dotted red line is the 21, and the next dotted red line is the 22. So it's somewhere between 21 and 22, and you're guessing how far between it is. Looks like it's a little more than half, so maybe you'd say 21.6, maybe you'd say 21.7. But that point decimal place in this situation is extremely important, and it gives us a lot of information about what kind of glassware you were using and just how precise the measurements are. You might read through this section about the pipette just kind of quickly. You're going to see a pipette being used in the lab. Read through about the burette. There's these little sections where you can pause at those videos. That should help you with understanding how to read the burette. Electronic balance, just make sure you show all the digits and that you state a number that is showing all the digits. That last digit might be wobbling up and down a little bit. That's fine. That's because that's where the scale is trying to decide the uncertainty of the measurement. And obviously there are safety issues in the lab. Now the other thing that we're going to be doing in the lab, besides watching those 5 videos and filling in the information at the different points in the lab, is that you're going to be doing some treatment of the data. So here's an example of one thing you might have to do is take the average. Obviously, you've taken averages before. And so you can just see the example here. This is going along the volume of the object, the 5.2, the 15.8, the 14.9. You're dividing by 3, you get 15.3 right here. This is our example. And make sure you're good with averages. The next part is you need to make sure to understand how to calculate percent error. You can use percent error when you're comparing two measurements. You just have to assume that one is true and one is the experimental. And in the lab, there's a little note on the lab sheet that shows you where the true value and the experimental value should be. But you take the difference between the two, and then you divide by the true. So it's experiment minus true over true. Notice there's an absolute value sign. Also very important. This is a place where you really need to pay attention to your sig figs. Notice right here, how did this end up with 2 sig figs? Right here at the negative 1.2. This explains how you end up with 2 sig figs. It's very important to pay attention to it. Your answer should always be positive though. Here's some more examples just to make sure you understand how to do percent error. Now we have average deviation. This is another thing you need to be able to do in the lab. And that's when you take each trial and you compare it to the average. And so notice right here, the average is this 15.5 value in all 3 cases. And then if you look at the little chart, it's the 3rd row. In one case, you're subtracting the 15.2, the next the 15.8, and the next the 14.9. So it's that area on the chart. Once you do that, then you take the average of those numbers. That's where you get the second part of the measurement, the plus or minus 0.3. So in this lab, you may be taking the average first. So you may be actually taking the average first, and then you're going to do some measurements to figure out the percent error. Or you might be figuring out the percent error and then taking the average, or you might relate everything to the average deviation. You want to pay attention to what you're doing in which parts of the lab. And you can always refer back to this document if you need it. So we're going to go back out. Here's the procedure. If you want a little bit more of a lab experience and you want to read through this, you can. It is not required to read through this, but this is the procedure that you would have used in lab. Going back. And now, this is the data sheet. Again, you must either make a perfect copy of this, or very close to perfect, or print it, or you can save it digitally and write out digitally if you have the equipment to do that. In this first case, there's a section for percent error and then average deviation. And in the second section, you have a percent error, and then you're going to do average percent error. So look back, make sure that you understand what those different things are for this lab. Every time you're just doing an average, that is just taking all the numbers, adding them, divided by the number of numbers. Then you're going to answer these questions right here from the lab. When you get the whole thing finished, you can go to, I'm going to go to course content, and then I'm going to go to our getting started section. This has a document in here that you'll find helpful. It's called Download the Cam Scanner app. You're going to take your documents, you're going to use the CanScan app, and you're going to take pictures. Then you're going to put it in the Dropbox. So you're going to go to Activities, click on Dropbox, and the only Dropbox that's possible is this one. And then you'll click on Add File, and this is where you'll upload the file. So if you took all the pictures with your cell phone and use the CamScan app on your cell phone, you can actually save with that CamScan app to different places. You don't have to save it to your cell phone. If you have any comments, if something went wrong during the lab, or any comments to make, you can add comments. And then don't forget to submit. Check back when you have a grade listed, and you'll see the markings here.